Hi, and welcome to the first preparatory video of the course Semantics and Pragmatics in the summer term 2021. In this first video, we'll briefly talk a bit more about Plato and mainly about his text Cratylus. So, Plato was an ancient Greek philosopher who lived in the 5th and 4th century BC. And as you might know, he was a student of another famous Greek philosopher, Socrates, and among his own students was, for example, also another important philosopher, Aristotle. And Plato, in his texts, discusses a wide range of different topics, from philosophy to ethics to politics, but also art, rhetoric, and for us here, especially important, linguistics. And his text, where he mostly talks about linguistics, is Cratylus. And so now let's have a look at Cratylus. You already have the passages uploaded on Blackboard. Unfortunately, they are not the best version because I had to make photos of the actual book. I don't have a scanner at home, and this version of the book is not really available in a digital version, but there are a lot of freely accessible digital versions of Cratylus on the internet. So you can definitely find also other versions of this text, and the differences are really not that big. The only thing is that this particular version, translated by C.C. Reeve, is very nice to read. It's translated into a very readable English, which is not always true, because one of the versions of this text in English that is freely accessible online is written in a sort of very outdated English from the 19th century, and it's not really that fun to read. So I thought that even though it's only a series of photos done by my phone, I thought that it might be easier for you to have the nice copies, the nice version, so that you can actually focus on the content and not on how weird the language sometimes gets. Right, but back to Cratylus. So Cratylus is a dialogue, or more precisely, a trialogue. This is something that Plato does a lot. His texts are often in the form of a dialogue or a discussion between different persons who try to convince each other about a certain topic. And in this case, we have three figures, as I said. So there is Cratylus, who eventually gives his name to the whole text. Then there is also Hermogenes, and then Socrates. When you start reading the text, the situation is that Cratylus and Hermogenes have been talking about language and about philosophy for a long period of time, but they haven't been able to reach a conclusion that would satisfy both of them. And for that reason, they decide to invite Socrates, who is a renowned philosopher, to participate in that discussion and show them what he thinks about the topic. And now the text of Cratylus has two parts, basically. In the first one, we only see Hermogenes talking with Socrates, while Cratylus remains silent. And in the second part, the roles change a bit, and Cratylus talks with Socrates while Hermogenes is silent. This is not really important for our discussion here, because the passages from the text and our discussion about Cratylus will only focus on the first part, so for our purposes, it's simply a dialogue between Hermogenes and Socrates. Right, so the text was written probably in the last decade of the 5th century BC. This can be established based on some historical references or references to concrete places and things, and so yeah, we can be fairly certain that the text is approximately 2,500 years old. But nevertheless, the topic is still important for us today, and we will also learn about the history of semantics and of the study of meaning. Right, but now the main question is probably, what is it actually about? And very generally, Cratylus is about names and about their origins, and about the question whether there can be correct or incorrect names. And now, also throughout the whole text, Plato talks about names, but what he actually means, the translation of the English word name in the Greek original is onoma, and it doesn't only mean proper name as we understand it nowadays, but it also basically refers to nouns in general, to adjectives, and to other words as well. So for our purposes, we can simply say that Cratylus is about words and about the meaning of words, right? And this discussion between Hermogenes and Socrates basically oscillates between two big topics. On the one hand, there is something usually called conventionalism, while on the other is naturalism. And what I mean by that will be explained here, right? So we have these two advocates of two different ideas about how words or names get their meaning. There is Hermogenes, who is an advocate of conventionalism, while his opponent or partner in discussion is the advocate of naturalism. Conventionalism basically says that there is no natural relationship between a name or a word and its referent, right? So Hermogenes gets asked by Socrates this exact question, and he says, no, words are words simply because we decide, or a society decides, that a certain name belongs to a certain person or refers to a certain person. If we decide to, for example, swap a word like horse to mean human, we can do that. There is nothing prohibiting us from doing that. We can simply do that, and that's it, if we wanted to. On the other hand, there is Socrates, who says that is actually incorrect. And he says that names, whether all names or some names, we don't need to discuss that at this point, but he basically says that names are naturally correct, right? That meaning that there is a natural, some sort of a bond between the reference and the word, which is natural. And that means that there is also, that you have a correct way to describe something or to name something, and there is also an incorrect way of describing something or naming something. And Socrates has sort of two different sort of lines of argument. And the first one is that he says, okay, so there are certain names given by humans to things, and then there are names given by gods. And those names given by gods are inherently more correct than those given by humans. And this might sort of sound odd for us nowadays, but it's actually not as odd as you might think. There are still sort of theories about that, but more on that in 2 weeks' time. But this is basically also the idea that is in the Bible, right? So that in the Garden of Eden there was Adam, right, the first human, who sort of pointed at different things around him and gave names to those words, right, and to those things, and then those things had these sacred or true names. And then over centuries, right, so people got their different languages, and these true names were hidden, but you can still somehow restore the true names. And this is also true in other traditions. For example, the Jewish tradition, right? The true name has certain powers and things like that. But this is also the argument that is expressed here by Socrates. And another thing that he says is that etymology can also say something about whether a name is true or correct or not. And the etymology of a name has also can tell us something about the characteristics of its bearer. Right? So, for example, my name is Martin. And if I were to do the same thing that Socrates does, I would have to right. Martin is derived from the name of the god of war, Mars. Right. Martin is then sort of one who is named in honor of Mars. So that means that following this logic, my true name should be Martin because I have some, I don't know, warrior-like features, or I don't know, I can throw a javelin at a lion or something like that. And if I don't do that, then the reason is, or if you don't see my warrior-like features, the reason for that might be that I simply have a wrong name, right? So this is something that Socrates also explains, how people can get wrong names and that those names should be sort of corrected, but more on that during our live session next week. So now you approximately know what Cratylus is about, but what we are going to do in the live session is that after having read the text or the passages, we'll be able to discuss how they actually argue for these positions and how do they support their claims empirically? What data do they have? What arguments they use? Things like that. So that's what's going to happen on Wednesday, and this is the end of the first preparatory video. If you have any questions or if you want to ask me anything before our live session, as I said, don't hesitate to contact me. But for the meantime, thank you for watching and have a great week.